Reaction coming up in a moment here. Also, we are 11 days out, America. Donald Trump turning up the heat on the Clintons over Wikileaks. It's been a big week already and a big Friday coming at you right now. I'm Bill Hemmer. Welcome here to America's Newsroom. Here we go. Morning to you.
Good morning, Bill. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being with us this morning. So here's what's new. Trump slamming Bill and Hillary Clinton over the latest bombshell revelations, showing the former president received millions in personal income that was linked to the Clinton Foundation donors. Trump saying that the Clintons would do it again, that they would use the Oval Office to rake in money for themselves if she wins. At a rally last night, he questioned why the election was even being held.
We should just cancel the election and just give it to Trump, right? What are we even having it for? What are we having it for? Her policies are so bad. Boy, do we have a big difference.
John Roberts joining us now, live from New Hampshire, where Donald Trump will be campaigning later today, and 4 electoral votes are up for grabs. Good morning to you, John.
Martha, good morning to you, and a crowd of people gathering here in the lobby of the Radisson Hotel. They'll be making their way in the next few minutes to that Trump rally, and you can bet that he's going to talk more about this idea of how the Clintons made their money. You know, New Hampshire and Maine and Iowa, where he'll be later on today, 3 real must-win states for Donald Trump. He trails Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire and Maine by about 2 points. He's got a slight lead in Iowa. And a new ABC News tracking poll out this morning shows that the race is narrowing further. It's got Hillary Clinton now with a 4-point lead. That's down 2 points, 48 to 44, rather. Donald Trump has improved his standing in that tracking poll by 6 points since it started. 3 events yesterday in the battleground state of Ohio, where the Real Clear Politics average shows him up slightly more than 1%. Trump joking, as you pointed out, that, hey, they should just cancel the election and declare him the winner because Hillary Clinton, in his words, would be so bad for America. But really drilling down on this idea that we have seen the Clinton movie before, are you sure you want to see it again? Listen to what he said.
If the Clintons were willing to play this fast and loose with their enterprise when they weren't in the White House, just imagine what they'll do given the chance to once again control the Oval Office. And we've had enough, honestly. I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness. Right? Don't you think?
In addition to all that, Trump will also be talking about Obamacare, his plans to repeal and replace it, particularly when you look at where it's going now with premiums. Jobs in the economy, always a big issue here in New England, as well as the heroin epidemic that really has decimated places like New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. Martha?
So true. So 11 days to go. It's clearly crunch time for the Trump campaign, and they're talking about early voting. What are they saying about that, John?
People have been going to the polls in a number of states. Of course, absentee ballots have been coming in. The Trump campaign and Republican Party very happy with where they are now, pointing to absentee ballot returns in the state of Arizona, where they say that between that and early voting, they are up by 35,000 in terms of the number of Republicans who have returned ballots. You don't know who they're voting for. They're 1.2% ahead of where they were in 2012 in Iowa. And they say that in North Carolina, they lead by 8 points in absentee ballots. And let's take a look at Florida. I really think this is fascinating, because every day we get a report from the state of Florida, broken down county by county, on where we are with early voting and absentee voting. In the early voting, the Democrats lead by 37,791. But in mail-in or absentee ballots, Republicans are ahead 52,140. So the net is that you've got 14,349 more Republicans who have returned ballots. Not to say that that's the way they're voting, because all the Republicans could have voted Democrat and all the Democrats could have voted Republican. But we'll assume that a lot of them will be voting that way. The problem for Trump, though, really is Colorado, New Hampshire, and Maine, and North Carolina. If he wins Colorado, he can afford to lose New Hampshire and Maine, and vice versa. But he's got to have North Carolina with its 15 electoral votes, or this thing could be all over, Martha, because it looks like Pennsylvania is beginning to slip away for him. And I've lost you in my ear, Martha, so I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, and North Carolina's looking tighter in the latest numbers that we see. This is a really fascinating moment in this race. John Roberts, thank you very much.
We are waiting for Kellyanne Conway, the Trump campaign manager. We will talk to her in a moment about a lot of things that John was just talking about there. But before we go to her, I want to bring in Chris Starwell in Washington, D.C. And, sir, good day to you. Are we able to gauge the effect of the WikiLeaks story on voters so far, Chris?
Not really. It's hard to know. When we measure the consequences of a story on the electorate, especially in the waning days of a campaign, the question is, so there are kinds of stories that enthuse somebody's base dispirit somebody's base or persuade persuadable voters. With the Clinton stuff, I assume that most of the people on the Republican side that would be put off by, and I think the particularly damaging revelations that are in Doug Band, a longtime associate of Bill Clinton, his former body man who turned into sort of the guy who was running what he himself called Bill Clinton Inc. That kind of stuff is distasteful, I think, to the Republicans who are already voting against her. I don't know how many Democrats are put off by that. Are there some Bernie Sanders voters who might be affected? I don't know. Persuadable voters, does a lot of it get lost in the noise? Probably.
Okay, now the other big issue this week, rate hikes in Obamacare. How do you see that playing out and the effect on voters so far?
This was a bad. This is now you know why President Obama wanted to move the implementation of the more noisome parts of this law until after his reelection. I don't know what it does exactly for Donald Trump, who isn't much identified with this issue. But for somebody like Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, for somebody like Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire, those Senate candidates, Roy Blunt in Missouri, there's a chance that Republicans can use this to hold on to seats that look to be slipping away a bit.
Okay, I'm looking at a lot of the national polling today, and the folks who track this for a living like yourself, they're shooting out tweets for the past hour suggesting yet again the race is tightening. What do you see today, 11 days out? What is the state of the race?
I think it's important for people to chill out. There is so much hyperventilation, so much freaking out about polling as it goes up, it goes down. She's up 12. She's only up 1. Back and forth. That's why we at the halftime report produce a delicious average of polls each day. And you know what the average of polls has said? It's pretty consistent. He's down 5-6 points. That's basically where 5, 6, 7 points. It's been within that range. If you focus on individual polls, you can freak yourself out that there's huge changes going on in the race. But if you take an average of well-produced, excellent polls, then you're going to end up with a race that hasn't changed that much.
There is a story today, Politico, I believe. Study done, 7 out of 10 Republicans believe there's a hidden Trump vote. People who will say simply, publicly, they won't admit voting for him. Privately, they will. Where does this come from? Why would that be?
There have been elections in the past, most notably in North Carolina, when Jesse Helms won his seat over Harvey Gantt, that there was undercounted vote for Helms, that the polls didn't catch the vote for Helms because people didn't want to say that they were voting against a black candidate for a candidate who had been accused of racism. So certainly there's precedent in the past for people being ashamed of their candidate publicly but voting for them privately anyway. I would imagine there's some of that for Hillary Clinton, too. Democrats aren't exactly happy with Hillary Clinton. Especially as the stuff in the Wikileaks reinforces about the corporate connections and the centrism and all that jazz. So we'll see.
Thank you, Chris. Kellyanne Conway's with us now, Trump campaign manager from Trump Tower. And Kellyanne, good morning to you. You're listening to Chris and hearing John Roberts. You probably have 15 million Americans who have voted already. What's the state of the race, Kellyanne, from Trump Tower?
Well, we're very happy, Bill, with what we see in these early returns. The RNC does a great job every day of updating us on the absentee ballot returns and the requests. We look at states like Florida, Ohio, Iowa, and North Carolina, which really form our core 4 that we would add to win this race. And we're very happy with what we see in these early returns, specifically as compared to 2012. I mean, that's really our benchmark. But the RNC has done a great job since 2012 in ratcheting up its own data operation, its own field staff, and we've been benefiting from that, anchoring it to what we're doing here at the campaign. I would say one thing about the polls, though. Could I ask you this, though,
Kellyanne?
Yeah,
and I'm trying to cut through the spin on both sides, by the way, and I'm not suggesting this is spin, but there's a story today that suggests from the New York Times that Trump has stopped putting money into his own campaign. Is that true, and will that change?
That is not true, and he will continue to make investments into his campaign, including in these last 11 days. He has said publicly many times he's in for $100 million, and he is happy to invest in his campaign. But I also want to remind everybody that we'll never have the money Hillary Clinton has, and we'll never have the personnel she has, but we don't need it, frankly. She's outspending us 7-1 on TV, and for what? For the Washington Post ABC poll to go from -12, plus 12 for Hillary Clinton on Sunday within 4 or 5 days, plus 4 for us. The trend lines are going in our favor. I think they have to put the champagne back on the shelf over there at Clinton headquarters. Every time the media bet against Donald Trump, they get surprised yet again that the voters are having it a different way. The other thing I would just point out to you, Bill. In terms of the undecided voters in the Fox poll that was released, in the Fox News poll, the undecided voters at 7% are really our voters. 10% of them are white men and women without a college degree, 13% independents, 9% rural voters. Why is that important? It's important because they've all decided not to vote for Hillary Clinton. And now in these closing arguments, Donald Trump will bring them home as he's bringing these other voters
Back to
home.
the question, is he going to write a check today?
He may. We'll see what happens today.
Okay.
And I can tell you that he's very excited about these tightening polls.
I got it. I want to get through a lot of stuff before the commercial break hits here. You follow the map today, right? She's in Iowa, he's in New Hampshire, then Maine, then Iowa later tonight. He goes to Colorado on Saturday and then Arizona on Saturday. Why is it necessary to go to Arizona this late?
Well, we haven't been to Arizona for a while, and we're making a stop there while we're in the West, and we know we're going to hold Arizona. We've got a great team there on the ground. And I guess the question for Hillary Clinton is, why is Bill Clinton in Pennsylvania for 3 stops today, and why will she and Tim Kaine be in Pennsylvania for 2 stops on Monday? This safe, reliable Pennsylvania that's always a pipe dream for Republicans. I would ask both Clintons and Tim Kaine why they're going to Pennsylvania, especially after they snookered so many in the media to write these ridiculous stories that they're competing in Texas, they're going to win Georgia, going to win Arizona. She's going to compete in Texas, and what did that mean? It meant they spent $100,000 there as a marker. A decently run Senate campaign in Texas cost upwards of $60–70 million. So I would ask the Clinton campaign, too, if you're not worried about a state like Pennsylvania, what in the world were you doing there last weekend, and why in the world are you there this weekend? 2
quick questions. You just heard the question I posed to Steyerwalt. If it is true that Republican insiders believe that voters will not admit they're voting for Trump, why is that?
So the undercover Trump voter that I've been talking about under heavy assault for months it's a multidimensional factor here. One is what Chris Steyerwalt was saying before, which is people just don't want to tell other people they're voting for Trump. That's only because they are more traditionally a Democratic voter. Perhaps they voted for Bill Clinton twice or Barack Obama once or twice. And they're just tired of arguing with family, friends, and colleagues about it. But the other undercover Trump voter are it's this nut of people who have decided they will not vote for Hillary Clinton, and they're just trying to get over to Trump. They're really trying to say, you know what, I am part of the 76%, according to the Fox News poll, that wants to take the country in a new and different direction. But can I really vote for somebody who's never been in politics before, who is different, who is an outsider? And that's a little bit more to swallow for voters who... yeah, it's been the argument from the beginning, but listen, there's not a single hidden Hillary voter in the whole country. They're all way out, and they're accounted for. She rarely gets above 46% in any of these statewide polls. That's really the number to look at. Her ceiling is about 46%.
I'm out of time now, but thank you for yours. Kellyanne Conway from Trump Tower Today. Thank you. Martha.
So in the final 11 days, Donald Trump is using the Wikileaks revelations as a springboard to launch new attacks on the Clintons. He says that they show that she cannot be trusted in the White House and that as a couple, he does not believe they should be there. Juan Williams is Fox News political analyst and author of We the People. Mercedes Schlapp, former spokeswoman for President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Let me start with you, Mercedes. How palpable, how helpful do you believe this WikiLeaks information is to Donald Trump? Is it penetrating to the American voter?
I don't know if it's penetrating enough. I think that there's so much information out there with all the different emails that are coming out on these appearances of the conflict of interest on Bill Clinton, Inc., and the fact that John Podesta and his sister-in-law, Heather Podesta, were involved in a deal in the State Department. So I think that the more the focus is on Hillary Clinton, the more the focus is on these emails, I think it does have a negative impact on her. The question is it enough to really continue to close that gap for Donald Trump so late in the game?
I mean, sort of the headline here, Juan, is the millions of dollars that was raked in these speeches, the fuzzy lines that exist between corporations and introductions that were made, and then money that was paid to Bill Clinton. And, Donald Trump, speaking about this last night, said, we've had enough. We've had enough of this as a people. Let's move on. Let's not invite this for 4 more years. How worried do you think the Clinton camp is about that message getting across?
Well, I think at this point it comes across, as Mercedes said, a lot of static, and it's just been such a consistent drip, drip, drip on the WikiLeaks front and all the back and forth about the Russians and all that. But I think that it has created or added to the weight of the question of, is Hillary Clinton trustworthy? This latest revelation about Podesta and his sister-in-law, it looks like the revolving door, the kind of incestuous relationships that people have contempt for when they think about how Washington works. But if you're asking about the political impact, I think what Mercedes said is right. I don't know that it's penetrating, and it's pretty late in the game.
Yeah, I mean, we did see a flip in the honest and trustworthy number. She is now getting lower numbers on that than he was. And, you know, there was a moment in poll time when that wasn't the case, so it may be penetrating a little bit here. You know, when you look at the case in Virginia of the state senator who was running, we now know, Mercedes, that Hillary Clinton herself headlined an event for the FBI. One of the top guys in the FBI, his wife, who was running for state senate, and it all overlaps with the time that his office and the FBI in general were investigating her. I mean, you know, who thinks this stuff is a good idea? Clearly not Neera Tanden. She doesn't think much of what's happening there is a good idea.
Neither does Uma Abedin, where she's like, Hillary Clinton is creating her own mess. And I think that the problem that's happening with the Clinton campaign is that they're hoping that they could just run out the clock, just get through Election Day and hope to God that this whole situation is over and done with. And they keep just blaming it on the Russian hackers. They're not addressing this issue. This is exactly what happened when with the private email server when she said, well, what are you going to do? Wipe it off with a cloth? It doesn't work. It's not convincing to the American voter. And I do believe that if Donald Trump continues on this crusade to basically say, look at this. This is why when Bill Clinton left office, George W. Bush came in to restore the integrity of the presidency. This is an opportunity right now for Donald Trump to say, do we want to have the same problem where we have corruption back in the White House with Bill Clinton, Inc., where they made a lot of money mixing nonprofit foundation with their paid speeches, their profit world. And I think that it really gets very sticky for the Clintons. Leave it there.
Juan and Mercedes, thank you very much.
His plane skid off the runway at LaGuardia last night. It rained all day here yesterday and hard. Sent this tweet out, quote, so thankful everyone on our plane is safe, grateful for our first responders and the concern and prayers of so many. Back on the trail tomorrow, which means today. And a short time ago on Fox and Friends, he said this about that last night.
I think obvious to everybody on the plane that that they were hitting the brakes very hard. Our son is a Marine Corps aviator, and he says all the time, Dad, you know, any landing you walk away from is a successful landing.
No question. Laura Ingalls at LaGuardia. How's it going today, Laura? Good morning.
Hey, Bill, good morning. Well, the sun is shining and things are back to normal here at LaGuardia after last night. And, of course, things had to be shut down here for a while. The runways, all of them are now back up and open and operating. Both of them running this morning, I should say that, and the plane has been moved out of the grass and mud where that plane came to rest. We've got some video to show you of how they got this thing out of there. There were no injuries. We want to remind people of that, to the 48 people on board. And officials here at the airport say there was no damage to the Boeing 737 plane, despite the fact that this 110-foot aircraft slammed through a bunch of concrete barriers known as arresting beds to slow its roll and to stop it from going off this short runway at 7,000 feet and getting dangerously close to a nearby freeway. The weather last night, Bill, as you mentioned, it was just terrible. There were hard rains, high winds, heavy fog. Republican vice presidential nominee Mike Pence talked with Fox and Friends more about how it all played out on board.
They were hitting the brakes very hard, trying to bring the aircraft to a stop. We fishtailed a little bit, and then we passed through that part where the concrete breaks apart.
The arrestor blocks.
And then we saw, you know, I saw mud splash up on the windows on either side of the front of the aircraft, and that's when I knew we were probably off the runway.
Pretty scary stuff. That plane was towed to a hangar. It's going to be inspected by investigators with the NTSB, who will be looking at the aircraft itself, of course, the maintenance records, weather conditions last night, and those all-important arresting beds, which are lightweight, crushable cement blocks designed to slow down and stop an aircraft which has overshot a runway. And airport officials say, Bill, that plane went through 80 of those barriers last night.
Holy cow. Dan Gallo with Fox News was on board last night. He's embedded with the Pence team. What did he say?
You know, it's what makes being in bed so exciting. And I did talk to Dan Gallo this morning about his experience. He said, you know, because of the size of the plane, it is a large aircraft, and some of these smaller airports that they travel to, they've actually had a couple of rough landings before, but certainly nothing like this. He shot some video inside the plane last night and sent us some pictures. He said this was much different, of course, because they could smell burning rubber immediately when they touched down. And he says at one point he felt like the plane could have gone sideways, comparing it to when you're, you know, driving in the snow and you slam on the brakes, adding, we just weren't stopping. He says that they're getting ready to go to the next stop. They're not leaving out of LaGuardia, but they'll be going out of Newark this morning, heading to Pennsylvania for Pence's next rally.
Thank you, Laura. Laura Ingle there at LaGuardia, where usually it's a mess anyway. You know, I mean, on any given day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So a lot of brand new polls that we are chewing over this morning. A very tight race out there. We're going to take you through some of these new polls, the states, and show you just how tight this thing is. With 11 days to go until the election, nobody resting on their laurels out there. What does it mean for the chances of these two candidates? We'll be right back.
When we win on November 8th. We don't want to take it for granted, but we are winning in a lot of states. I have to say, the media now, they're going.
All right, let's dig in here and see where things really are. Just 11 days until the election. Pressure is on. We've got some brand new state polls that show the race is tighter. In Georgia, Trump is ahead by 1 point, according to the Quinnipiac poll. It is a dead heat in Nevada. Both of those states are must-win for Donald Trump if he wants to put together a path to 270. New Hampshire is another state that he really needs. 4 electoral votes that could potentially get him from 266 to 270. He is down, according to this look, NBC News, Wall Street Journal, by 9, a fairly large margin. Kyle Klondike joins us now, managing editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia Center for Politics and author of The Bellwether, Why Ohio Picks the President, which is becoming a very interesting question, Kyle, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that in states like Iowa and Ohio that are generally whiter than the national average, and are in some ways otherwise demographically favorable to Trump, I think those are states are probably about 50-50. The good thing for Clinton is that she doesn't really need those states, nor does she need certainly a state like Georgia, which should be pretty reliably Republican in recent presidential elections. Yeah.
So we are looking at the scorecard as it stands right now, and let's take this full in the control room so that people can get a look at it. 307 for Hillary Clinton is the current scorecard by our decision team folks. 174 for Donald Trump and 57 toss-up states. Now, basically, Kyle, you know, if he won all of the GOP states, all of the battleground states, and all of the leaning Republican states, he would still have to pick up a place like New Hampshire in order to close 270, correct?
Yeah, that's why states like New Hampshire and Wisconsin are so important, because they're not really big states. New Hampshire's 4 electoral votes, Wisconsin is 10. And Trump really, I don't think he's led a single poll in either of those states in terms of independent polls. But you can plot a path for Trump to get to, you know, somewhere in the 250s and 260s in the Electoral College. But to get him to 270, he needs to win some states where, frankly, he hasn't really shown much strength for the entire election cycle.
All right. So when you talk to the Trump campaign, they believe that the next 11 days, obviously, are crucial. There's no way around that. But that they do have a path, and that they believe that the undecided voter, we just heard Kellyanne Conway say this moments ago, are basically all people that are open to them. Do you agree?
Not necessarily. I think that there's still some of a potential Clinton vote that's parked in the third-party column right now. We've seen Gary Johnson. He was probably at about 9 or 10 points as of maybe 5-6 weeks ago. He's been dropping, but I think to the extent that maybe he drops a little bit more. A lot of Johnson's support has been disproportionately young, and younger voters are generally would be more pro-Clinton than pro-Trump if they had to choose between the two. So if the third-party vote for Gary Johnson and Jill Stein continues to decline, I think maybe that's helpful for Clinton. And, you know, the other thing that is so helpful to Clinton, I think, is that she just has a lot more staff in a lot of these key states. and she just has more funding to put into that stuff. And so if polls are tied in a certain state, it may be that her ground game might be worth an extra point or two, and maybe that is the difference in some of these states.
You know what the Trump folks would say? They would say our enthusiasm gap is worth a point or two, and that these polls, you know, that are sampling 1,000 people here, 1,000 people there, simply don't measure the enthusiasm that he's got behind him.
Well, I think that if the race were, 1 or 2 points nationally, I think that could potentially be an argument. But I don't think that's really where it is right now. I still think that Clinton is probably up 4, 5, 6 points nationally, and by similar margins in enough states for her to potentially win the presidency. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that the race is over. I'm not sure that it is. I just think that Clinton does still seem like a pretty decent favorite here with less than 2 weeks to go.
When you look at possible wild card situations, what are they?
Well, certainly if Clinton were to overperform on Election Day, she could win states like maybe Arizona or Georgia or maybe even Texas. I really don't think that's going to happen. Probably the most interesting one is sort of off the radar, and that is that third-party independent conservative Evan McMullin seems to have a decent chance to win the state of Utah, which is reliably Republican. For Trump, if he's going to pull off an upset, I think New Hampshire and Wisconsin are states that you ought to look at.
Oh, no doubt. They are spending time there over the next several days. Kyle, very interesting. We'll check back in with you in a couple of days. Thank you very much.
I was blindsided by her private server, Neera Tanden from the Center for American Progress, writing the following. Do we actually know who told Hillary she could use a private email? And was that person been drawn and quartered like whole thing is bleeping insane? Congressman Mike Pompeo. Out of Kansas, member of the Benghazi and Intelligence Committee, sir. Out of Wichita, Kansas, thank you for your time. I think you would probably agree with that sentiment. It's bleeping insane. We've talked a lot about this now. What do you believe with so much coming out every day, sir, for 2 weeks? What is the effect of this Wikileaks story?
Well, I'll tell you, what you see in these emails coming out is the people closest to Hillary Clinton don't trust her either. Just like the American people have come not to trust her. You can see that at every step of the way, she was seeking to hide and to deceive the American people. Remember, she told us there was no classified information on this email server. And we can now see this was a system set up with the purpose and intent of deceiving voters and constituents all across the country and the people closest to her, including a man named Patrick Kennedy, who thought this private server was a great idea, he wrote in an email. We can now see that this is what we'll get if we elect Hillary Clinton president. And people closest to her know it as well.
Okay. If she is president, and if Republicans control the House in January of 2017, the investigations will likely continue, correct? And if that is true, sir,
yes, sir.
Where do you start?
Well, so I think we start with her fabrications that she continues to tell the American people, and that she said under oath, at least one committee, the committee that I served on, the Benghazi committee. I think a great place to start is to unpack the untruths that Secretary Clinton has told the American people that amount to crimes if, in fact, she testified falsely to Congress. I think that'd be a great place to start, and I think that's important that we do that for every American citizen, and we do this whether Hillary Clinton is elected president or not.
So do you believe she lied when she sat before those committees?
Oh, yes, sir.
You do?
Most definitely. I absolutely do. She told us things that were knowingly false that day that she testified before our committee.
If that's the case, and she's the commander-in-chief, there's a cloud there. And you're going to have a government now that from day one, likely, listening to your answer there, will be opposed to actions that have occurred before she was elected by the American people, if that's the way it goes in 11 days. Now,
Bill,
how does that advance the cause of Washington or the country?
I don't think it does, Bill. I think that's why it's important that she not be the commander-in-chief. I think it's incredibly important that we've seen now for decades how the Clintons operate. Right, $50 million now, we know one of her closest associates directed to Bill Clinton, and that her team knew it. John Podesta, who she thinks is going to be her chief of staff, was directing this. This is outrageous. It is not good for the American people, and I think that's why on November 8th, they shouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton to be the President of the United States.
Mike Pompeo, do you think Donald Trump can win today?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your time. Out of Wichita, Kansas.
Thank you.
Certainly will be interesting
Thank you,
regardless come January of next year. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bill.
Brand new revelations out of the emails that spilled out through Wikileaks, including a description which goes further than what we've seen before in terms of the bubbling all-out war that existed between Chelsea Clinton, who was very concerned about the reputation of her father and her mother, of course, and her scuttle between she and this aide, Doug Band, who ran Teneo. So we're going to get into the details of this. Welcome, everybody. Brand new hour now of America's Newsroom. Glad to have you with us on a Friday. I'm Martha McCallum.
I'm Bill Hemmer. Yesterday this hour, we had the emails about the alleged cooperation between the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign, which it would tick off a lot of Bernie Sanders fans. Chelsea Clinton reportedly writing to Cheryl Mills and others against Doug Band, including alleged spying. Ed Henry's working through all these. Good morning, Ed. Different day, same time. What are you finding already?
Well, you're right. I mean, remember the part of the story yesterday being this 2011 memo where Doug Band, a former Bill Clinton intimate, said, look, Bill Clinton's pocketed $30 million from donors to the foundation that then hired him for speeches and consulting contracts, and there's another $66 million between now and 2020 to come. Well, part of that was Doug Band striking back against Chelsea Clinton, who was blowing the whistle on what she saw him trading favors on her father's name. A new email out in the last few moments where Chelsea Clinton, as you say, writes to Cheryl Mills, the top Clinton advisor, that a foundation employee, a Clinton Foundation employee, told her that he, quote, physically saw and caught a Doug Band associate a couple of days ago reading his BlackBerry and loading the same spyware onto his computer that he loaded onto another foundation employee's computer. So what was happening behind it? All we've heard about is how everything is wonderful at the foundation. They're doing great work around the world, spying on each other, money, favor trading. And then look at this from early 2015, the Clinton camp itself going back and forth about what to do, what kind of statement to put out about the Clinton Foundation. A proposed statement says, quote, like other global charities, the Clinton Foundation receives support from individuals, organizations, and governments from all over the world, acknowledging there something they didn't want to previously acknowledge, that they took money from foreign governments. Robbie Mook, the campaign manager, says, well, per John Podesta's construct, I'd tighten the top about foreign governments and kick off instead with how the foundation's work benefits millions. Just get right to that. So you see how they try to pivot there, just like they did in that debate with our own Chris Wallace, the third and final debate. Hillary Clinton pressed by Chris about pay-for-play allegations, never answered that, instead pivoted right to great work around the world, though.
Yeah, there were emails about Israel. I guess what you had Catholics and evangelicals. What are they saying about Israel?
This is interesting. Yeah, remember anti-Catholic comments, something about needy Hispanics in previous emails that were pretty shocking. Now Neera Tanden, who pops up a lot as a pen pal, she's a liberal activist, and writes to John Podesta, quote, Israel is depressing. It's a good lesson that the wingnuts are just ruthless in every country. This is March of 2015. We checked the context, and this was when Prime Minister Netanyahu had just addressed the Congress, a joint session of Congress that was very controversial, and she's reacting there. Why is that significant? Neera Tanden is not just some outside activist. She is the co-chair of Hillary Clinton's presidential transition. If she wins in a couple of weeks, Neera Tanden, you see it right there, is going to be at the center of putting together the next administration. So these kind of comments might get a little notice today.
Quickly, the Eric Garner case came up. I mean, what was there?
There were deliberations in some of these emails, John Podesta and others saying basically, how can we politically use this case involving Eric Garner? Remember, I Can't Breathe, that infamous case in New York. And they were going back and forth. Well, Eric Garner's daughter has now put out tweets and statements saying she's troubled by these emails that the Clinton campaign was flat out saying, let's use this case politically. Quote, I'm troubled by the revelation that you and this campaign actually discussed using Eric Garner. Why would you want to use my dad? So look, this is embarrassing for the campaign because these are the kind of deliberations. If you went through the Trump campaign's emails, they'd be using political people in the news, political issues left and right as well. But it's all spilling out in real time what the Clinton camp has been doing. And remember why that's significant. Getting the African-American vote out for Hillary Clinton in large numbers like President Obama, big part of this election.
Been making a lot more phone calls lately, you know, and one-on-one conversations.
Apologies.
Stop writing down, America.
Yes, and apologizing too.
Unbelievable. Ed, thank you. Martha has more.
Lots to get through here. Let's bring in Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace. Chris, good morning to you.
Morning to you.
So let's kind of go backwards here. The Eric Garner one is of interest. You remember the mothers of the movement who took over the stage during the Democratic convention. So Hillary Clinton's campaign has definitely tried to connect with the African-American voter based on what they saw as these situations of violence that was brought on by police against civilians. And now you've got Eric Garner's daughter speaking out and saying, please don't do that. Please don't use my father's death for political purposes. Does this hurt her?
Well, marginally. Look, what we're seeing is sausage making. We're seeing what goes on behind the scenes. And as Ed Henry just pointed out, you can be sure that the Trump campaign or every political campaign, if you were to see the emails that go back and forth about top advisors, about how do we limit damage, how do we take advantage of situations, isn't meant to be seen in the light of day and doesn't look good in the light of day. Sure, it shows the kind of cold calculation that goes on in a political campaign, that they've got the death by, it wasn't in fact a police shooting, but it was a case of police acting against Eric Garner, who was trying to sell some stuff on a street corner in Staten Island, and he got choked and died from that. And the campaign was trying to use that in trying to activate the black vote. And one of the things that Eric Garner's daughter, was upset about was the idea that they were using police violence in this case, as I say, it was a choking, to make a case about gun violence, which of course wasn't involved at all. There were no guns involved in the Eric Garner case. So it's ugly, it's sausage making, and it's something that the Clinton campaign, it may not be being done in emails now, but you know that there are the same kind of conversations going on. How do we handle the WikiLeaks? And I'm sure they're saying, well, let's make a big point about the fact that this is stolen. Let's make a big fact about the case that it's the Russians. So in a sense, they're doing damage control now, trying to limit the damage from the earlier emails.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right, and there's no doubt that the making of the sausage, as you put it, that's out there now, based on this, and based on, in many ways, the tenor of this whole campaign, may have simply turned off some voters. And you look at the undecided voter who's still out there. We just heard from a viewer a little while ago who said, I'm not undecided, I'm disgusted. I don't want any part of what I have seen out there, and I'm going to stay home. And, that'll be part of the postscript on this election, Chris. We'll see whether or not that is a factor.
Oh, absolutely. And I believe it's in the Fox poll that came out this week that Hillary Clinton, even though she's leading in the polls, her negatives, her unfavorables on the question of honesty and trustworthiness are higher than they've ever been. I think it was 70% do not find her honest and trustworthy. The interesting question is going to be whether millions of Americans are willing to vote for her anyway because of their concerns about Donald Trump. The one thing that's come out in WikiLeaks that I think really may be damaging to Clinton is the revelations about the foundation. And to a large degree, I think the emails are factored or priced into the market, if you will, already. If people were upset about the private emails, they already are. If they're upset about this stuff, they already were. But the foundation and finding out in that Doug Band memo about what he called Bill Clinton Incorporated and the tens of millions, almost $100 million that was going to go into Bill Clinton's pocket at the same time that they were raising money from huge donors, foreign and domestic, and the complete blurring of lines between personal profit raising, charitable giving, public service by Hillary Clinton's State Department. When you had someone like Bob Woodward of Watergate fame saying on Fox News Sunday last week that this is corrupt, that's pretty striking. And I think that one of the things you're seeing here is just how troubling the blurring of the lines or the erasing of the lines was when it came to the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah. I mean, if that is potentially a factor over the next 11 days, it'll be interesting to see if the campaign comes out and tries to make a clear statement about what the foundation looks like or whether or not it closes down and what they plan to do going forward if she wins, because it may be something that they need to get out in front of even at this late date, given what has spilled out there. Chris, thank you. Always good to see you. We'll look for you on Sunday. Thanks, sir. A lot of chatter about this in political circles. Are big money donors starting to slide away from Donald Trump? New reports this morning that show Republican super PACs are moving their money to the House and Senate races. This has been going on for several weeks to a certain extent. And Donald Trump has also indicated in some ways from their campaign that they are focusing their money on their own stuff and not so much on the rest of the Republican Party. Some GOP incumbents fighting for survival right now, including Senators Kelly Ayotte, New Hampshire, and North Carolina's Richard Burr. We're going to go through some of these numbers for you in just a moment. But joining me now, RNC Chairman Reince Priebus. Reince, good morning. Good to have you with us today.
Hey, good morning, Martha.
So what's the state of what we just had in our introduction there? Is that true from where you sit?
Well, not from where I sit. I mean, we outraised the DNC last month by $2 million. We outraised the DNC by $38 million for the cycle. We've outraised the DNC by $6 million for the year. And we have a $44 million cash advantage over the DNC. So I don't know. I guess people are forgetting about the fact that the party committees are the committees that have most of the hard money that these campaigns need in order to win these elections. These candidates can't even communicate with these super PACs. The only people they can communicate with is themselves and us. And we're crushing the DNC. So I don't really get the narrative, to tell you the truth.
Well, I guess the question is more the money that's moving around within the party and where that money is focused. Let's go through some of these races because there's an increasing concentration looking at these Senate races and whether or not Republicans will be able to hold the Senate. Let's go through some of these so that folks at home can see the real Clear Politics average of all the polls that are considered to be out there and substantial. You've got Kelly Ayotte in a very tight race. Let's scroll forward. That's New Hampshire, of course. Florida, Marco Rubio looks like he's in a pretty good position there. Pennsylvania, very tight race between Pat Toomey and McGinty. Nevada, Joe Heck against Cortez Masto. That one is very tight as well. North Carolina's tight. Burr and Ross, and let's go to the Illinois Senate race, which is Duckworth and Kirk. Also, there was an uncomfortable moment in that debate the other night between the two of them, where he suggested that her family had not been serving the country since the Revolution, which she proved him wrong on. So are you concerned about the vulnerability of the Senate out there?
No, well, look, I mean, you worry about everything, but the truth is what you're seeing is the reason that tightening is happening again in some of the tougher races, without going through every one of them, is because Donald Trump's also getting stronger. If you talk to these Senate campaigns, they'll tell you that the last 10 days have been good for us because not only are there our senators doing a good job, but Donald Trump's doing a great job at staying on message, talking about Hillary Clinton, talking about the choice between him and her, which is obviously a trust choice, and the reason these races are tightening up is because we're stronger at the top of the ticket, and I think the next 11 days is going to be a continuation of that, and it's still a long time, and I feel very confident about what's happening in the Senate. But the other piece of this, Martha, and it is important to note, all of this works together. I mean, you can't have a good ground game in Nevada by identifying and turning out Republican voters. That doesn't help both Joe Heck and Donald Trump. What we have here is a very unique situation where almost every battleground state that you would talk about that's important to Donald Trump is a battleground state that's important to our chances of holding the Senate. So these two conversations can't be divorced from each other.
But they are in cases.
Together.
I mean, you look at Kelly Ayotte and the ad that she put out where she basically says, look, you know, no matter who you vote for at the top of the ticket, vote for me. I'm independent. And then let's take a look at this ad in Illinois, which is not a battleground state, but you have Bob Dole, and this is an RCC-funded ad, which says this. Watch.
Who will put Illinois first? Brad Schneider has voted the party line nearly 90%. Won't stand up to his own party's scandals. No independent leadership. Bob Dole is rated one of the most bipartisan members of Congress. And Dole is an independent voice who stood up to Donald Trump months ago.
Advertising that he stood up to Donald Trump months ago, and that's the reason to vote for that Republican, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean that's not uncommon, Martha. I mean, when you're in very independent places like Illinois, northern Illinois, where Bob Dole is from, the northeastern part of Illinois, and you look at New Hampshire, it's always, you know, the play for independence is always going to come into play. You can see that in districts across America where you have very Republican or very Democrat district. The candidates will actually put vote for Republican in the name or vote for Democrat in the name. But when you get into a split district, you don't see any labels on anybody.
But if Donald Trump loses this race, you know there will be a major conversation about how hard some of the Republicans out there across the country pushed against him early on, and that, you know, coming home to the party, as is the theme of the past few days, if it doesn't happen, will be one of the reasons he loses.
Well, I think that it's important for Republicans to remember what Donald Trump spelled out in the first 30 minutes of that debate. I mean, I thought that first 30 minutes was fantastic, not just because he did well, but he laid out the points for Republicans across America. Number one, conservative Supreme Court in the eyes of Justice Scalia. Number two, he made a very articulate case for the Second Amendment in the next topic. In the third topic, he made a very articulate and compelling case for life. I mean, spelling out the issue of partial birth abortion, where Hillary's at. We haven't had a Republican spell those positions out like Donald Trump did in the first 30 minutes.
Thank you. I hate to cut you.
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period. If you like your health care plan, you will be able to keep your health care plan, period.
June 2009, President Obama pitching Obamacare there. Did that pan out? Well, the White House is now getting ready to push Obamacare in some of the red states despite big premium hikes set for next year.
The bottom line is that most people are going to be pleasantly surprised at just how affordable their options are if we can just get them to see for themselves.
Well, okay, so put your glasses on, Money. Melissa Francis, co-host of After the Bell on the Fox Business Network with me now. Good day to you.
Yeah, you caught me making a face there because that whole thing is just, wow.
Kind of scary around Halloween. He said you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
I don't know how he can possibly say that. I mean, if, for example, they're in Pennsylvania trying to push this thing. In Philly, the benchmark premium, the one that most people buy right in the middle, up 51% across the whole entire state of Pennsylvania, which you mentioned earlier on the show, critical on both sides. You're looking at the average rise from $213 a month to $327 a month. Would you be pleasantly surprised if you opened your bill and you were like, it was $213, now it's $327? Oh my gosh, I'm so pleasantly surprised.
I can't do a lot of things, but I can add, and I think you're right about that. Arizona, I mean, what a phenomenal increase there. Is that because of seniors? What's the deal in Arizona?
They try to talk about the average there, but really you look at the silver plan, that's the one that most people buy. It's that cheap one. When you get in there and you tackle that, that's the one that's up 116%. It's because providers are leaving. It's because you can't buy that catastrophic insurance any longer. I mean, it's all the reasons that were really obvious. President Obama, you know, he likes to talk about how the subsidies
are covered.
Right, are going to cover all of this. They would if people who made under $47,000 a year were buying insurance and were buying it on the exchange. There's about 7 million people out there who qualify for the subsidies, and he uses those when he's talking about it. Oh, you know, the subsidies are going to cover it. They aren't buying on the exchange because they either don't want insurance because they're buying insurance that they're not using, or they're getting it from their employer, they're buying it somewhere else, they're not buying it on the exchange. So a full 7 million people that he talks about, they're only going to pay $75 a month. They're not, because they're not buying insurance.
John Gruber, right, the architect, he was on CNN 2 days ago, and what he suggested is that the law was fallible because the penalties for not signing up were not great enough.
Right.
In other words, the incentive, the punishment that you would take to not sign up did not run deep enough into your pocket. And the other thing he said is that this is what happens as it transitions to its new state.
Its new state.
What is that new state?
I mean, this is the ominous thing that people have been talking about from the beginning, that this was all about driving it to the single-payer system, to having the government pay for and distribute all insurance, control your health insurance. If you like the VA, that's what you're getting. It's the VA. That's what they're trying to move towards. And it was logical. If you look at the math and you look at the models, Gruber's from MIT. He's a very smart economist. He knew where this was going, that the insurers would drop out, that premiums would spike, that the government would have to pay for it or no one would do it. So then the government would control it and also provide the insurance. The single payer, everyone pays taxes. You pay for the insurance for everyone around you, and they get crummy coverage and care, unfortunately, like our wonderful veterans are getting in the VA. That's what you're going to get.
Regardless of what happens in 11 days, this is going to be a story.
It is.
Starting in January.
It is, because every year it
Again.
gets worse. Every year it gets worse.
Okay, we'll see you at 4 o'clock?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on,
and I'll be here at noon and 2.
Oh, my
I'm
God.
so busy today.
She never leaves.
No.
What's up, Martha? Hillary Clinton's campaign team blindsided by news of her private server. John Podesta, Robbie Mook apparently kept in the dark. Podesta asking Mook just hours after the news broke, "Did you have any idea the depth of this story?" He replies, "Nope, we brought up the existence of emails in research this summer, but we're told that everything was taken care of." Tucker Carlson, co-host of Fox & Friends Weekend, editor of the Daily Caller, and a Fox News contributor, and good day to you. That was March of 2015. The reference to summer would have been 2014.
Exactly.
What are you seeing?
And by the way, a new batch of Wikileaks emails just dropped about 40 minutes ago, so there may be more on this. But look, it's a continuation of the portrait that we have seen over the past couple of weeks of a staff doing their best to cover for a principal about whom they don't know everything. They are not fully in the loop on this and a lot of other issues. And by the way, they come off, I don't agree with them, but they come off as more adults really than the people they're trying to cover for, Bill and Hillary Clinton, in a lot of cases. But they're horrified by this because they can see right away that this is going to be a massive problem. They know it's illegal. Everyone in Washington does. You're not allowed to do this. The idea that that was a mystery to anyone in the District of Columbia,
I guess,
is false.
What we don't know is who was around her that said, hey, you know, you might want to think twice about
apparently
this.
there was nobody, and that's why I think it is revealing of her management style. In this and in other cases, you see no one is willing to go to her directly and say, you know, this is a very bad idea. This speech you're about to give before, you know, some bank for $250,000 right before you run for president, like, don't do that. And nobody seems empowered to say that to her.
There was this that came up from Tandon. Put that on the screen right here because this is sort of revealing. Do we actually know who told Hillary she could use a private email, and has that person been drawn and quartered like the whole thing is blanking insane? So that's 4 months after March of 2015.
And she cuts right to the heart of it. I mean, who is the person in Hillary's world who can call her on her overreach? Everybody needs someone like that in his life. I mean, period. Everybody does. And you get the sense that she's so imperious and unapproachable that there is no one. And so it's a recipe for bad judgment.
That may be true for her team. You wonder what was coming out of the White House, because we haven't really been able to nail that aspect down just yet. Mike Pompeo, Republican out of Kansas, was with us about 45 minutes ago. And I think this answer, if Hillary Clinton wins in 11 days, if Republicans control the House, this is intriguing. Listen to what he said about the state of her testimony before Congress. Do you believe she lied when she sat before those committees?
Oh, yes, sir.
You do?
Most definitely. I absolutely do. She told us things that were knowingly false that day that she testified before our committee.
Now, he went on to say, and this is why you need to vote for Donald Trump, but if this is the case and this plays out this way, what does Washington look like in late January?
Chaotic. And, you know, increasingly, I believe voters are anti-chaos, and I think Trump has lost some votes on this. People, you know, don't want any more volatility in our political system. It's making them very nervous.
Trump has lost.
I think that. I think that. But some people are saying, you know, I agree with him, but I'm worried that he's not the steady hand that I'm looking for right now. This suggests that a vote for Hillary is not a vote for stability either, because there are a lot of loose ends. I mean, part of the downside of the press just refusing to cover a lot of the WikiLeaks stuff is that it hasn't fully been aired. I mean, it doesn't mean that this stuff won't come to light. It will in the end, and if she's elected and it comes to light, or public consciousness, after the election, it guarantees a really rocky first term for her.
If that's the case, we can both remember 1997 and 1998.
Very well.
What a time that was. You want to talk about gridlock now. How about then?
Well, but see,
what would change?
You're seeing in some of these emails her staff saying maybe we should get everything out there now. You know, get it out now, early. So we're inoculated against this. It's a political polio shot. Let's not wait until, you know, the stakes are much higher. And that advice, for whatever reason, was ignored, and they didn't. But everything comes out in the end. This is the key lesson of Washington. Nothing is hidden forever. And how sad that some of this stuff will be publicly debated and people will learn about it if she's elected after she becomes president. I mean, ugh.
Thank you for your time. Is there an emoji for that last one?
Oh. Sorry.
What's that look like?
That was pretty guttural. I don't know.
See you on the weekend. Thank you.
As we go back to politics with 11 days to go, could Clinton's past spell big trouble for Hillary Clinton's future? Perhaps. The hacked emails show the former president turning a profit from his family's foundation by hitting up donors for high-dollar speeches, and critics say that that combination presents a very big problem. Syndicated talk show host Leslie Marshall and Republican strategist Tony Saig, both Fox News contributors, welcome to you both.
Good morning, Martha.
So who knows what the outcome of the election is, but everybody's sort of considering both scenarios and what life will be like in America under each. So, Tony, let me start with you. In terms of what we've learned from Wikileaks and how Clinton Inc., as they termed it, really works, what does that present?
Look, Bill Clinton's issues related to his donors, his business dealings, his associations have certainly hurt, certainly inspired the idea that there was some sort of collusion between the Clinton Foundation, Clinton Inc., as we now know they called it, and Hillary Clinton's State Department. But what's come out, Martha, is damning. This is Doug Band, among the top officials who dealt with the Clinton Foundation, one of Bill Clinton's closest aides, in an email to Chelsea Clinton saying there were about 500 conflict of interest between Bill Clinton's dealings and the foundation and potentially the State Department. This is to the degree you believe there was collusion and that the server was set up and kept private to hide that collusion, the smoking gun. And if we got enough emphasis on it, enough coverage on it, which I actually believe we've begun to see even from some mainstream media, like the New York Times and the Post, it could be very damaging.
Yeah. Here's Chuck Todd pointing that out. Let's watch.
Look, let me go to the bottom line. There is no way on any circumstance that the Clinton Foundation should be operating if she becomes president. I don't see how they can keep that going. I just don't.
Leslie, do you agree?
Well, I don't say to close down the foundation because it does certainly more good than it does harm, and I know some would argue with me. But I do think if she is president and if Bill Clinton is the first man, that they cannot have an involvement in this foundation. That I do agree with. However, I don't feel that it's negatively impacting her. If you look at the polls in battleground states or on a national level, Trump has arguably come up maybe 1% in some of those states and on a national level in the past week. So I think maybe it just reaffirms people who aren't voting for her as to why they're not, but I don't think it's going to sway an undecided voter not to vote for her.
I mean, for the
somebody
purposes
already
of this
planning to vote for her to
conversation,
leave.
we're not really discussing whether or not it's helping or hurting, but if she were to win, what should happen with this foundation? You know, one of the most shocking things that I found in going through this is that it turned out that a lot of donors didn't want to donate to the foundation unless there was some sort of connection. In other words, they didn't want any part of it unless there was, you know, some sort of consultant or Bill Clinton speech attached to it or something that gets them something for their involvement, which is, you know, I mean, I think everybody's been involved with charity to some extent. This is exactly what you don't want. I mean, this is so clear that there was an effort to buy influence with Bill and Hillary Clinton as an integral part of this. And even their own daughter was trying to snuff it out. Tony?
Yeah, Martha, look, I'm sure they've done some charitable things. There's a lot of mob organizations that have very benevolent front groups. But the reality is this was a wholesale lobbying racket run by Bill Clinton, leveraging the connections and position of his wife, who was the sitting Secretary of State, getting foreign money into this, foreign business interests into this, who are otherwise precluded from donating into the political process. This is why Bob Woodward, who understands Watergate, he was the reporter that broke it, called the Clinton Foundation corrupt on a Fox News Sunday interview and said that the Clintons still have not properly answered questions. And this is going to be an albatross for them. Whether it's November 8th is the consequence or beyond, this is a very big deal when you're talking about this level of potential corruption.
But it's potentially ongoing, Leslie. I mean, you know, I guess it is surprising to me that you wouldn't want to see the connection between these two entities clearly broken off. I mean, now you go from Secretary of State to potentially President of the United States, and you've got foreign countries. Robbie Mook said in one of his emails, you know, take the part about our relationship with foreign countries off the top, because I don't think it looks so good. Doesn't that concern you, Leslie?
Well, like I said, if she were elected president and he were to be first man, they cannot have any dealings with the foundation. I don't think it should be shut down. Should there be an investigation?
But they were supposed to keep it separate under the Obama administration. The Obama administration said, look, wait, watch what you're doing here.